Hello everybody, welcome back to another video. Today I want to talk about multi-note sound design, which is a type of sound design where you use multiple notes, multiple of the same notes to trigger a sound and then use information like velocity to actually modify the sound. So this sounds very complex, but the basic idea is that we set up some modulation that has to do with the MIDI notes coming in, and then we trigger the note multiple times at the same time, and then we get multiple of those modulations, multiples of those sounds being added together in the synth and then processed. So from there we can obviously do crazy things in terms of sound design, and today I just want to show you some examples of what we're doing and show you how to actually do this. Hello, I quickly wanted to say if you want to support this channel, you can do so by listening to my music on Spotify or Apple Music, or by going to my website and looking at some of my products. There are even free ones that you can download really easily. Alternatively, if you're interested in private lessons, I also provide those, and all the information for that you can also find on my website. So here you can see I have a faceplant instance and I have 4 MIDI tracks being sent to that faceplant instance, and we can create some cool sounds out of that like this. By the way, if you want to play with this project and you have faceplant installed and you want to experiment a little bit more, you can get this project on my Patreon. Starting at $3 per month, you can support me and you will get presets, discount codes and a whole bunch of other benefits, including for the higher tiers, early access to my videos. So yeah, if you're interested in that, there's a link in the description, but for now let's go back into the video. So let's quickly look at what is going on within this patch. Now, the important thing to note here is, apart from all of this stuff here, which I can just minimize, we have this one velocity control, which is being used for a whole bunch of different modulations, mainly the filter cutoff here, which is what we're talking about now and which is interesting now. Now, if I play a note with just my keyboard here, you cannot really hear it, but we can look at the velocity here. If I turn it down, you can see this filter cutoff changing depending on the velocity. So I was experimenting with this a little bit and I decided to see what happens if I send just multiple of the same notes with different velocities to faceplant here. And that's what we did here. So right now we don't have an arpeggio on there, and I've set the filter cutoff modulation amount, which controls the actual modulation being done by the velocity, to the maximum. Now if we look at the slice EQ here, you can see what happens. We get 4 different spikes, and that is because for each of these MIDI clips we have one velocity here, a second velocity a little bit lower, a third velocity a little bit lower, and then a final velocity all the way down. So what that means is that those spikes that we see here, these ones, are basically controlled by the position of the velocity. Now that doesn't sound very revolutionary, there isn't really a lot that you can do with it, you would say, but that's actually pretty wrong. There are some very cool things that you can do with it. For a start, what faceplant allows you to do is it allows you to use this poly function here to process each individual voice differently. So this distortion and pitch shifter is not actually being applied to the whole sum of the 4 notes, but to each individual note. Now for this pitch shifter here, what I wanted to do is I wanted to do an effect where for each note we're pitch shifting it in a different way. So to do that, this is where the remap came in. Now the important thing for this to work is that for each note you need to sit between a different range. So here's the first range, this is the second, this is the third, and this is the fourth. And this is just used to isolate those different ranges. Then we generate 4 random signals here, and those are sent to the pitch shifter. Each of them is sent to the pitch shifter, and then each of these controls the activation of one of those. So here you can see if we play it and we turn up this macro here, which controls the overall amount, you can see we get 4 different random signals which determine the 4 different modulations for each individual note here. So just looking at this, what this looks like on this spectrum here, you can see that each one moves differently. which already gives a very spooky and kind of strange effect to the sound. Now that together with some clever automation here of these two parameters, this controls the overall cutoff and this controls the spacing of the different points for individual notes based on the velocity. So basically this velocity amount here, we can create some very cool sounds already. But there is something even cooler that we can do with this, and that is that we can randomize the velocities going into it. If you remember when I talked about controlled randomness, we often used random velocities as one of the parameters to use for the modulation. So what I've done here is for each of these notes here, I've used an arpeggio to get the 16 note, and then I used this random preset here, and I modified it for each one of them to just select one of these velocity areas. So this one is the top one, this second one here is the middle top one, and then we have the middle lowest one, and finally the lowest one, which for some reason doesn't actually show up, but this, as you can see, it is there. So now by playing it we get that 16 note randomization. Now that's very cool, but you can make it even more complex by, for example, saying, okay, I'm going to turn this one and this one off. We'll keep the lowest two stable, and then the highest two will use this arpeggio thing. In this case I got it the wrong way around, so how you would do that is you would go like this then. Let's switch all four of them up. So that's already pretty cool, but there's obviously a lot more that you can do with that. For example, we could still use these ones here with the lower velocity and just set slower rates. So let's set a 1/4 here and maybe a 1/8 here. And for good measure, let's set this to 1/4 as well. So now you get these four plugs, these four bandpan plugs, which interact with each other. They're using the same starting point, but they're all being modulated like differently, and they all trigger at different speeds. So as you can see, overall it's a very powerful way to do things. Now we can take this to the next level. Obviously we can do a lot more with this idea here. What we could, for example, do is say, okay, we want to start off with this sound here playing, and then we slowly build it up and create more and more and more higher harmonics to it, or higher bands to it. So something like this. Now obviously you could do this with 4 instances of the synth, but the cool thing is that editing stuff like this is just a lot faster. Say, okay, I like this sound, but I want there to be a lot more distortion on it. You don't have to go into 4 different synths and increase the distortion amount. You can just do it in 1 different synth. Just keep in mind that all of the effects that you want on the individual voice sit in a poly lane, and all of the effects that you want on the sum of all of the voices sit in a non-poly lane, like this. So that was the technique that I wanted to show for today. I hope you can use this to create some very cool sounds. I hope you find some time to experiment with this. If you enjoyed these kind of technique videos, let me know by leaving a like. And if you want me to discuss a particular technique or idea, then leave a comment down below with what idea I should talk about next. Finally, if you're new here and you want to stay in touch with everything that I do, then subscribe and turn on the bell notifications if you want to get a message from YouTube whenever I upload something. But for now, this is going to be the video. I hope you enjoyed, and I hope to see you in the next one. Bye bye.
In a very deep and bitter sense.